ਸਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਨਾ ਮੌਬ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਮੇਰੇ ਫਾਦਰ ਉੱਪਰ ਆਏ, ਹੱਥ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੈਟਰੋਲ ਦੀ ਬੋਟਲ ਤੇ ਮਾਚਿਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਮਦਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪੈਟਰੋਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਪਾ ਲੈ, ਬੇਟੀ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਪਾ ਲੈ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਗ ਲਗਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਮਜ਼ਦੂਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਬੀਵੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਬੁਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨੀਆਂ ਪਾਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਨਾ, ਉਹ ਬੁਰਕੇ ਪਵਾ ਕੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ, ਮੇਰੀ ਮਦਰ ਇਨ ਲਾ ਨੂੰ, ਸਿਸਟਰ ਇਨ ਲਾ ਨੂੰ, ਈਵਨ ਮੇਰੇ ਦੇਵਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਰਕੇ ਪਵਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਟਰੱਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਠਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
We're doing this special interview on Partition, on the 70th anniversary of Partition, at a very special place with very special guests. First of all, let me just introduce both of them. We have Gurinder Chadha, director, and Huma Qureshi, part of the film called Partition 1947. And also on this side, very special guests, Dr. Santokh Singh and Santi Ramji, both of whom are Partition survivors. Dr. Santokh Singh was only 7 at the time of Partition, and Santi Ramji was a teenager. And sitting right next to them is Malika Ahluwalia, who's the curator of this museum. And this museum is going to open on the 17th. And why I chose this venue for our interview is not just because part of Gurinder Chadha's research is displayed in the Partition gallery in the museum, but also just a little bit about it. The well, for instance, has a story. We're going to get to that. But before, when we talk about Partition, Gurinder Chadha, for me, it's interesting you pick it as a theme, because a lot of people, like I don't know if Huma has a partition, her family has a partition story or not, but so many people have partition stories in their families in India. But you're from Kenya, so how did you end up having a partition story?
Well, my family definitely were stationed in Kenya, but their ancestral home was Jhelum and Rawalpindi. So at that time there was a lot of movement back and forth, and my grandfather had built a big house in Jhelum where my grandmother and 5 children were in August 1947, and my grandfather had gone to Kenya on business, and my grandmother was there. There was a lot of violence going on. They were spending every night on the roof of the house. It was a 5-story house, and they had no means of protecting themselves except they used to boil water, hot water, and if anyone tried to come and attack them, they used to throw hot water at them. And then one day an Indian army truck came and said, "You have to get on the truck now." And she said, you know, मैं किथे जावांगी, सरदार जी आएंगे तो मैंने लाके जाएंगे, मैं पता नहीं मैं किथे जावांगी 5 बच्चियां ना, you know. But they insisted, and they put her on the truck. She didn't want to leave her home, and then she was on a train for 3 days without food and water, and they couldn't get off the train either anyway, because there was cholera, there's a lot of problems, and her youngest child, my aunt, died of starvation as my grandmother's milk bride. And
nobody actually talks about that aspect of, you know, the cost of that. People talk about the rapes, the looting, but the fact that someone was so traumatized that their milk dries up and the baby dies is just...
Yeah, it's harrowing. And my aunt is, you know, now obviously in her 70s in England, and she still cries when she tells the story. But as a little girl, this is the story that really affected me. She said they were in this little hovel, and they had the body of their sister, and their mother didn't know what to do, so she asked a neighbor to please give them, you know, sawa gaj of material. So they got some white material, and then she sent the children to find big rocks, and the children had to get the rocks to put on the baby's chest, and then they wrapped the baby in the cloth. And she said, "Asi chote chote se si dekhde si, enni soni si sadi pan," and all that.
My God. But why is this story of partition still relevant to young people?
Well, it's very relevant. I think, of course, you know, we can only hear all these stories, empathize with it, try and imagine that place, how it must have been But I think the important thing for my generation is definitely to talk about what now. You know, a few years back I went to Amsterdam. I went to the Anne Frank Museum, and as a little girl I remember reading that in school, and I was very moved by it because I possibly read when I was her age, and I was like, wow, you know, this could have been me if I just happened to be Jew and I happened to have been born, you know, in a country occupied by Nazi Germany. But when I went there recently, a couple of years back, and I walked in the attic where she was sort of, you know, kept with her family, and she was in hiding for so many years. They had all little quotations and her pictures and all the things that she used. I was really moved because I just felt that that's just so relevant even today.
Yeah.
You open the paper every single day, and there's so much of hatred that just keeps spewing, and there's so much of, I mean, I don't know, politics that tries to divide people.
Malika, you have to tell people the story of this well because it is unbelievable. We hear just the mega, you know, the big picture that people died, women were raped, but this makes it alive about the story of this well.
So what we're trying to do in the museum is create it as a people's museum to really tell the stories of the millions of people who were impacted. This particular well is a memorial to all the women who were lost at partition. Unfortunately, at the time of partition, there was a lot of violence against women, and that led to a lot of honor killing. In Punjab, a very common method of honor killing was jumping in the well. There's a particular infamous incident of Thua Khalsa where almost an entire village full of women tried to jump in the well. So this is really a memorial which we want to remember those women who were lost. But at the same time, to the point Huma was making, there are also so many instances of humanity at that time. So the pulkari that is next to the well,
Right, this pulkari, right?
pulkari right here, it belonged to a woman called Basant Kaur. And she actually, when their karwa was attacked, she, along with the other women in the family, jumped into the well. She was actually rescued by a Muslim friend of her son, who was a landlord nearby, who heard of the incident, and then took her home, kept her till it was safe, and then reunited her with her family. So we've placed that pulkari next to the well to tell both sides that yes, it was a very, very tragic and difficult event, but there was also a lot of humanity at that time.
And I think it's for both of you as storytellers, right? And storytellers and, you know, just playing it out, the partition is ideal subject because there's so many moving stories, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we found, I mean, the film has opened in some countries around the world, and I've been traveling with the film, and what is shocking is that most people in the world don't even know that partition happened.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about Indians as well, you know, NRIs. People don't know that partition happened, and people come up to me as well in England. People came up and said, we thought we knew a lot about India and the British Raj, but we had no idea that this happened on this scale.
No, but Dr. Saab, I wanted to ask you, as someone who is a partition survivor, when you come to a place like this, the museum, or when you watch a film like that, what's the first impact that it has on you? Or is there anything you want to ask Gurinder or Huma?
I would like to, but first of all, I'd like to point at that saw there.
Right.
I think Malika has done.
It's not
Can't show
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's a huge saw, about 30 feet long, dividing a wall, and that's exactly what Redcliffe did to India, to Punjab in particular. And Huma is right that people will want to know. So far, nobody knows about it. Perhaps our generation didn't talk much. The wounds were so much. The hurt was so much. The tragedy was so much. We didn't want to talk to our younger generation. The result is, if you go on the street and ask a youngster about partition, or about the 84 riots for that matter, they wouldn't care two hoots about it. And you are doing a fantastic job in bringing out movies like this. Those who are writing.
Why is it important to know, sir, about partition? Why should young people know? Which is what I asked Huma as well.
Shouldn't it be a part of history? Shouldn't they know what happened to their country? What were the sacrifices
It's not being
made?
taught enough in
It
schools.
is
You
not,
don't think
unfortunately
it's
not.
Well, the thing is, to be honest, it is taught in schools. It's not that it's not taught in schools in India. It definitely is. But I mean, what Sir's talking about, you know, unless your grandparents or somebody in the family, an aunt, or if somebody's not willing to talk about it, you know, you don't really understand. I mean, I mean, read in a history textbook that, oh, it was a mass exodus of people, and there's maybe one picture of like, you know, immigrants making from one place to the other with their baggage. But that does not really mean anything till you don't personalize the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the point is that, I mean, for a Western audience, the story is not even known. Like when we were in the UK and we were doing interviews over there with the Western press, a lot of people did not know much about the partition. It was almost as if the problems in the subcontinent were just a figment of it just happened somehow, you know. And I think it's important to acknowledge what has happened. Like I said, no, I mean the kind of trauma I guess that generation faced. How do you get closure? How do you get closure to what really happened? If you don't talk about it, there's a whole generation of ignorant Indians. I include myself, young people, you know, who don't really know what happens, and therefore, if somebody tries to, I'm saying today, tries to divide you or say something, you know, communal.
So here's the thing, because I want to ask that to you and Malika as well. At a time like this, where in India, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Malika I'm sure is, where there's so much hyper-nationalism happening, how do you make sure that you're touching the right chord about not blaming who to blame? You know, you said your film doesn't blame anyone other than the Brits, but did you feel that? Like, did you feel that I have to, if I tell the Pakistan side of the story, because it's their story as well, partition affected, we were one at that time, right? We were one, and everyone has family that side. Did you feel the pressure of, well, no, I have to be careful?
You know, for us, we speak of our museum as a museum of love, loss, and longing. And that's really when people come out of the museum, those are the sentiments that we think people will come out with. It's not a museum that's trying to assign blame, because this was unfortunately an event in which all communities were victims.
Okay.
And our focus on the people's stories, we're not focusing at the level of macro history, we're focusing on the level of people, and the fact that each of these human beings, millions and millions of them, was impacted, I think people really appreciate that.
And Gurinder Chadha, your source, of course, was this Narendra Singh, I think his name is. He's a historian, and he was an aide. No, he was an aide to.
He was an Indian diplomat. He was ADC to Mountbatten in 1948.
Right.
And then he was Indian High Commissioner to France for 20 years. But he's well known and respected in circles, and he knew Prince Charles, obviously, because he knew the Mountbattens. And I was at a reception in St James's Palace, and I said to Prince Charles that I'm making a film about your uncle. And he said, what are you basing it on? And at that point, my main source was Freedom at Midnight, which was seen as the sort of seminal book on partition.
Right.
And Prince Charles said, yes, that's good, but he said, but you must look at some other texts. Have you seen this book? And I hadn't seen Narendra Singh Sarita's book, and he said, please have a look, because it shows you how my uncle was totally set up by the British establishment. And
what does it say about Mountbatten, Lady Mountbatten and Nehru?
Well, I think that's widely acknowledged. I think they were very close. I think they had a great relationship. According to Pamela Mountbatten, they had a great love for each other, but it was purely platonic. So beyond that, you know, it's all speculation. But there's no doubt they were very close. And I think that I didn't want to focus on that in my film because it took away from the suffering of my grandmother. And for me, the focus for me was, why did my grandmother and people like them suffer? And I realized the political reason why they did it.
I understand.
And I think in this world of geopolitics, you know, we're very quick to question when another country interferes with another country.
Yes.
You know, but back then people didn't. And I feel that back then, the Indian freedom movement, which had been amazing in bringing the British Empire to its knees, was still quite inward-looking, thinking about India, whereas the British had traditionally always had a global perspective.
Yes.
You know, so they were looking at the future map of the world. India was only looking at the map of India.
And I wanted to ask you,
They had a very significant geographical point about Lord Mountbatten. Originally, Radcliffe was going to give the whole of Gurdaspur district to Pakistan. Then he was, whoever persuaded him, whether it was Nehru or Gandhi or whatever, they says, no, India will have to have a passage to Kashmir. if Gurdaspur had gone to Pakistan, we would not have had a passage that we currently have. And Mountbatten only told Radcliffe, no, you've got to divide Gurdaspur. Give half of it to India and the other half. This gentleman comes from the other half. To walk a few miles, it took them 10 days.
When people talk about the partition or now it's going to be 70 years and all of that, what does it make you feel, or how do you sort of look back and
I would say I was a bit too small to remember too much, but I do remember the Muslims were very helpful to us. I'll give you only two examples. I was in a school, a government school near Shalimar Bagh, and suddenly we heard a lot of shouting, rioting outside, and a few boys ran out, and the big burly Musliman Chowkidar, he closed the gate, and the rumor spread amongst us, we are all going to be butchered inside out here. But then when this rumor spread, a few people tried to sneak out. Then the headmaster came out and he said, no boys, don't worry, we are keeping you safe, there is rioting outside. We will open the gates as and when your parents or somebody comes to pick you up. And they were Muslims. Same way, my father left on the 15th of August, and he was virtually forced by his Muslim friends, saying that people from India who have come, they are full of vengeance. They want to kill you, you are the only Sikh around this area. He says, no, I'll go in the morning. No, this is interesting in the sense they forced him into his car and told the driver, run over anyone that comes in your way, otherwise you are going to have it. Within an hour of his leaving for Amritsar, the house was burned down, everything taken away.
I wanted to just end by asking both of you, Huma, especially you because you live here, Gurinder Chadha, you're there. But when there's so much talk and animosity, I mean, Aidil Mushkil stopped almost. I mean, it was almost barred and they faced a lot of things for using a Pakistani actor. So when you hear of actors and films being targeted because of any links with Pakistan, does that, I mean, what do you feel about it?
Well, I just feel actors in the film industry are soft targets. That's what I generally feel, I think, and everybody likes to sort of, lado everything on the film community. But I'll tell you something, the India that I grew up in, and maybe you may call me an optimist or whatever, I think it was 92, and there was some kind of communal tension going on in the country, and there was some kind of, something, and the thing is, so I grew up in Kalkaji, which was predominantly a Punjabi Hindu colony, and possibly there were 3 or 4 Muslim families, but we always, I mean, it was great fun. I always tell this that we used to do all skits together and everything, and when that happened, my mother, told my father that my dadi had a house in Nizamuddin, which is a more Muslim area.
Yeah.
So the first time my mother and my dad, maybe we're hearing all these things. Do you think we should just go to your mother's house?
Yeah.
And all the neighbors came and said, we will not let you go.
Okay.
If you go, Bhabhi ji, we will feel as if आप हमारे मुंह पे थप्पड़ मार के.
क्या अगर पार्टीशन न होता तो ज्यादा बेहतर रहता, आज आपको लगता है सारे एक साथ होते, या फिर
ये किसी को कोई पता नहीं है, कोई कहाँ का रहने वाला होता, कहीं उसका दाना पानी लिखा होता, दूर बाहर उसको खाना पड़ता. हमारे बच्चे इतने पैदा हुए हैं, वो बाहर के मुल्क चले गए, तो लिखा उसका खाना पड़ा, वो लिखने वाला वो है. आना जाना का काम जो है वो पता नहीं.
लेकिन मर्जी दे नाल जाना ते होर अपना बनाना ठिकाना ते जबरदस्ती भेजिया जाना, ਇਹਦੇ ਚ फर्क है.
जबरदस्ती भेजिया, कोई अपनी मर्जी ਨਾਲ नहीं आए. ਜਦੋਂ पार्टीशन होया,
I think there's nothing better than to end on this note when we're talking and celebrating 70 years of independence, to be at this place and to be speaking to both of you artists and to you as survivors and to you at this place, which reminds us all and tells us stories. I mean, we've all, as a journalist, we know of so many stories, but I think hearing and looking at this well and knowing what it stands for from such close quarters I just want to tell all viewers, watch the movie, also come here to the museum next time you're in Amritsar. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.